Daniel Lazar is a journalist and author joining us from New York. And we have Mike Billington from who's the Asia editor at the Executive Intelligence Review, joining us from Leesburg, VA. I'd like to welcome you both, and I'll start first with you, Mike Billington. We're looking at another reason for the U.S. to ramp up pressure against China. Of course, China is not going to let up on this whole issue. How do you assess the U.S. strategy in regards to Taiwan vis-a-vis China?
Well, just as the Ukraine crisis really doesn't have anything to do with Ukraine, it's entirely artificially constructed over many, many years in order to justify an attack on Russia. And in the same vein, the recent dramatic escalation, they even tried to send Nancy Pelosi there, and now they're sending a military delegation there to Taiwan, is not about Taiwan. This is their excuse for going after China, and the motivation of both the Ukraine and the Taiwan crisis, so-called, is the total breakdown crisis of the entire Western financial system, which is now in a hyperinflationary free fall. It's even beginning to hit the stock markets now, so nobody can escape the fact that there is no solution to the breakdown of the Western financial system. Raising or lowering interest rates will have nothing to do with the quadrillions of dollars that have been printed to try to bail out the already bankrupt financial institutions. The Schiller Institute is having a conference on Saturday and Sunday under the theme, "There shall be no peace unless the transatlantic financial system is put through bankruptcy reorganization." And that's the case. The solution, supposedly by the British and the Americans, is that Russia and China must be destroyed in order to prevent this alternative system of development, Belt and Road, progress, reaching out to the third world for development rather than austerity and zero growth, that this has to be destroyed. It's not going to work, and unfortunately, the only way it could lead is to a nuclear war.
All right.
Therefore, we must find a way to get the lunatic leadership in the U.S. and the U.K. to follow the vast majority of the population that does not want war and certainly does not want this financial collapse to join with us in demanding a new global peace of Westphalia.
Well, Daniel Lazar, when you take a look at the way that the U.S. has acted when it comes to China, obviously you have the issue of Taiwan, but you've had a number of visits by some high-ranking officials, including the U.S. President Joe Biden, who visited that area recently. And I'm guessing that one of the central themes behind these visits by U.S. officials, especially by Joe Biden, is to gather support from the regional countries there. But isn't that a hard task when you have these countries that really economically, in terms of trade, at a minimum, really are not that keen to cut that channel with China? So how can the U.S. gather support when it comes to its overall strategy in regards to China?
Well, that's a very good question. China has a lot of economic influence and pull in the region. It's very attractive for that reason. But the U.S. is working with that, and the Ukraine war has complicated things by essentially tearing away India from the Quad alliance that the U.S. organized last year. So the U.S. has its hands cut out, its work cut out for it in trying to create an anti-China alliance. But it's doing its best. It's working with Japan, working with India, working with Australia in an attempt to kind of create a kind of military envelopment of China and to assert itself in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and of course the Taiwan Strait in between. But it's a very dangerous game. And things could spin out of control very easily, just as they have spun out of control in the Ukraine.
All right, let's take a listen to some of the social media posts online on this topic, and we'll get right back to the conversation. Our first post: Americans want more military spending, more armaments, more plans to overthrow other nations. Americans want war with the Chinese over Taiwan. America wants the CIA to protect drug cartel operations forever. Next post. The whole world will be a mess because of America, the country which replaced Talibans with Talibans after fighting them for 20 years. No, they are just inciting others to fight while they sit on the fence and watch Ukraine has fallen. Next is Taiwan, and then EU divisions. Final post. America, Canada, Australia starting provocations and stirring up China and Taiwan. USA leading the provocation and others follow as puppets. All right, so I'm going to take just this one reaction by it's our second online post, Mike Billington, that says the whole world will be a mess because of America. Just that one particular sentence, and looking at the bigger picture, we are looking at the ramifications, as you just pointed out when you spoke and answered the first question, of not only the Ukraine situation, but also the way that the U.S. has dealt with China, former President Trump with its trade war, and now we're looking at the continued provocation. Is the cost that the U.S. incurring, not only on itself and its citizens, but the world, something that can be justified?
No, of course not. It's catastrophic. We're on the brink of a global war, which would almost certainly be nuclear. We're talking for the first time in history of the very real potential of the elimination of humanity, of the destruction of civilization as we know it. On the other hand, the fact that the driving force behind this is the collapsing Western financial system, something LaRouche warned about over 50 years, was imminent with the destruction of the American system when they took down the Bretton Woods and the Hamilton policies. This is affecting Americans and people all over the world, but it's affecting Americans very, very deeply. The vast majority of the population does not want a war with Russia. They don't want war, period. And they now are being forced to reflect on their passivity over the past decades in not doing anything about the fact that our financial system was being destroyed by this money printing and the bailing out of the banks rather than putting them through bankruptcy. So there is a response to this policy within the population that Europe is being destroyed, the U.S. is being destroyed by the sanctions that we oppose supposedly to destroy Russia, which is not being destroyed. It's destroying the West. The irony is that this is the intent. As Tony Blinken said, the banning of oil and gas from Russia is a good thing because it will force the West to agree to the fake science of climate change and end the use of fossil fuels, which is the British stunt to try to force Malthusian deindustrialization and outright genocide on the world. So this is a global policy which is only going to be responded to globally by bringing together a large number, a majority actually of the American people with Russia, with China, who should be our friends, our trading partners, rather than our enemies, and to create a situation in which the Wall Street, City of London, military-industrial crowd cannot get away with the insanity, the madness of their current policy.
Daniel Lazar, there are people, I'm guessing, in the States who are pushing the buttons when it comes to the way that the strategy has to unfold in U.S.'s foreign policy. The immediate ramifications are there right in front of them in terms of, for example, the stock market, in terms of inflation, and of course we're looking at other catastrophic consequences like wheat and grain, like fertilizers, that is threatening food stability across the world. But yet the U.S. is just plowing ahead and going ahead with its strategy. Where is it that a line can be drawn in order for that not to happen, which as a consequence, as our guest there said, is going to have blowback for the U.S. and the West?
I agree with Mike Billington that U.S. Foreign policy is really out of control. I mean, the U.S. has reached a level of incompetence which is extraordinary. The sanctions on Russia are backfiring. They're hurting the West more than they're hurting Russia. They're causing severe economic distress in the industrial world, and even worse, famine in the third world. And the military strategy is not working either, because essentially Russia is winning the war. So the Biden administration is facing a double defeat. But the administration is not withdrawing. It's not pulling back its horns. If anything, it's behaving more aggressively than ever on the second front, which is in the Western Pacific, regarding China. So the Biden administration is playing a dangerous game. It's ratcheting up tensions. It's seeking to confront China. And the great danger is that an explosion could occur there as well. And if an explosion occurs there as well, if there's essentially the world erupts in a two-front war or even a three-front war involving the Persian Gulf, then yes, the global situation becomes extraordinarily dangerous. And American irresponsibility is astonishing. And the problem is America doesn't realize that its days of global hegemony are gone. The golden age of 1991 to 2003, when the U.S. was the unrivaled dictator of the world, I mean, those days are gone. There's no bringing them back, and the U.S. has to adapt to a much more complex, multipolar world. But the fact that the U.S. is resisting is extremely dangerous.
Thank you for that, Daniel Lazar, journalist and author from New York. Mike Billington, thank you, from Leesburg, VA, Asia editor at the Executive Intelligence Review. With that, we come to an end for this news review.